What if your anxiety isn't yours at all, but belongs to the people watching you? It's a question most never ask, because we've been trained to look inward when we suffer, to fix ourselves, to be more confident, more disciplined, more grateful. But Carl Jung pointed to a deeper truth. Sometimes the real source of suffering isn't inside us, but outside, in the silent pressure to perform. We are haunted not by our own voice, but by the imagined gaze of others. Somewhere along the line, we stopped living and started acting. Every polite smile that hides fatigue, every yes we whisper when our soul aches to say no, becomes a quiet confession. We are still living for them, for their comfort, their praise, their acceptance. And in doing so, we abandon ourselves. Jung called this the great psychic split, the moment when the soul begins to fracture under the weight of external expectations. You may look successful, polite, even happy on the outside, but something inside feels numb, like a part of you is quietly disappearing. That is the moment life turns from a journey into a performance. And performances, no matter how convincing, always demand a price. You cannot play a role forever without losing touch with who you truly are. Many of us don't even realize how deeply we've adapted. We dress not for comfort, but for validation. We speak not to express truth, but to avoid discomfort. We pursue goals that are not ours, love people we fear losing more than we truly feel safe with, and silently endure lives that feel like they belong to someone else. And yet, we wonder why we feel anxious, empty, disconnected. Jung's warning was simple but piercing. The greatest prison is built from the gaze of others, and most people never realize they are trapped. But what if you stopped living through their eyes? What if you could stop editing yourself for their approval and start remembering who you were before the world told you who to be? What if the key to peace isn't in pleasing more, but in performing less? This is not a call to rebel. It's a call to return, to the raw, unfiltered presence of your own truth. Because the moment you stop asking, "What do they want from me?" and start asking, "What do I want for myself?" everything begins to shift. That is the beginning of real freedom. And it starts with the courage to live as if no one is watching. Have you ever smiled so convincingly that even you forgot how much pain you were in? It's a haunting feeling, walking through life with a mask so familiar, so praised, that you begin to confuse it with who you really are. You may be the one who always shows up, always says yes, always listens. You may be the strong one in the family, the peacekeeper in relationships, the one who absorbs everyone else's storms. And yet, behind the kind words and practiced patience, there is a growing ache you cannot explain, a quiet inner scream that no one seems to hear, because no one sees the part of you you've locked away just to survive. Carl Jung called this the persona, the social mask we wear to navigate the world. In many ways, it serves us well. It helps us function, protect our vulnerabilities, and find a sense of belonging. But when the persona becomes the only face we show, when we confuse it with our identity, it becomes our prison. We no longer connect with others from the soul, but from the script. We no longer feel joy in being seen, because we are never truly seen. The mask is applauded, but the heart behind it remains untouched. It starts subtly. You suppress your sadness so you don't burden anyone. You say yes to favors while your body screams for rest. You play the agreeable partner even when you feel unseen, unheard, and unloved. You laugh at jokes that hurt. You nod during conversations that bore or frustrate you. Slowly, inch by inch, you retreat from yourself. Not because you are weak, but because the world taught you that being too much, too real, too honest might cost you love, safety, or acceptance. And then one day, you look in the mirror and do not recognize the person staring back. Jung believed that this disconnection from the true self is one of the deepest roots of human suffering, because while the persona may gain approval, it silences the soul. And the soul does not go quietly. It manifests through anxiety, restlessness, apathy, and a strange sense that something is missing. People often mistake this feeling for depression, failure, or boredom. But what if it's actually the cry of your authentic self, begging to return? So many midlife crises are not crises of age, but crises of authenticity. The mask has been worn too long. The career you once celebrated feels hollow. The relationship that once felt safe now feels suffocating. The identity you spent years building no longer fits. And the tragedy is not that you are broken, it's that you have forgotten who you were before you began performing. Jung warned us that the longer we deny our shadow, the repressed, inconvenient truths within us, the more it leaks through the cracks. Unlived emotions become outbursts. Repressed needs show up as resentment. The love you withhold from yourself turns into the hunger for external validation. You start asking questions like, why do I feel invisible in a room full of people? Why do I dread silence? Why does love feel so exhausting? What if the answer isn't to try harder or be better, but to take off the mask? What if healing begins not by fixing what's broken, but by shedding what was never truly you? Can you remember who you were before you became the responsible one, the likable one, the perfect one? And more importantly, are you willing to meet that part of you again? Let this be a turning point, not a breakdown, but a breakthrough. Because the moment you stop performing and start revealing, you don't lose yourself. You finally return to yourself. The soul does not need applause. It only asks to be lived. What if the very praise you crave is the chain that keeps you small? We rarely question it. From childhood, we are conditioned to seek gold stars, good grades, and nods of approval from parents, teachers, friends, and eventually lovers and bosses. It starts innocently. A compliment here, a proud look there. But soon our nervous system is wired to feel worthy only when someone else says we are. And the chase begins, not for joy, not for meaning, but for validation. You keep running, not because you're passionate, but because slowing down might mean being forgotten. It's easy to miss how deeply this hunger infiltrates your life. You become the daughter who sacrifices her needs to be the good one, the man who buries his dreams to be the provider, the friend who avoids conflict at all costs to stay likable. You overperform at work, afraid that rest might make you look replaceable. You give too much in relationships, afraid that speaking your truth might drive someone away. Your days are full, but your soul feels starved, not for more success, but for something real. Carl Jung warned that when the ego becomes tethered to the approval of others, it loses its connection to the self. You become like a tree growing sideways, bending toward light that is not your own. Approval seems like love, but it's love with conditions. It whispers, "You are enough, but only if you never disappoint us." So you edit yourself. You shrink your mess. You postpone your grief. You delay your becoming. And though people applaud your version of success, you secretly wonder, but would they still love me if I stopped trying so hard? This is the trap. The more approval you get, the more terrified you are to lose it. You become addicted to applause but allergic to silence. You mistake visibility for value. Your worth becomes externalized, fragile, and dependent. Like a performer trapped in a play that never ends, you fear that one wrong move will make the audience leave. So you smile wider, achieve more, and abandon yourself again and again for the comfort of applause that never really reaches your core. It's a spiritual emptiness that success cannot fill. You might have the house, the relationship, the career, but inside you feel like an echo. The achievements feel numb because they weren't born from truth. They were born from fear. And this fear, Jung taught, is not just a mental state, but a symptom of the disconnection between the ego and the self. The ego wants to be liked. The self wants to be real. The ego wants safety. The self wants wholeness. So the question becomes, how long can you keep betraying your soul just to keep the world comfortable? Healing begins when you realize that approval is not love. Recognition is not connection. Pleasing everyone is not peace. True peace comes when you no longer need the room to clap. When you speak and sleep well, even if no one notices. When your actions are aligned with your essence, not your performance. Are you ready to live in alignment instead of applause? This is not a call to burn bridges or abandon roles. It is a call to return to yourself within them. It's about choosing to be seen as you are, not as you're expected to be. Jung reminds us that individuation, the journey of becoming whole, requires stepping away from the crowd. It's not rebellion, it's liberation. And when you begin to live from your own inner compass, you find a strange and beautiful truth. The love that truly nourishes you is the one that asks for nothing in return. What if what you call love is actually a quiet desperation to be needed? Many relationships that appear whole on the outside are held together not by genuine connection, but by silent transactions. A wife stays up late, tending to every detail of the home, not out of joy, but because she fears being seen as inadequate. A husband provides relentlessly, not from devotion, but from the belief that his worth is conditional. A friend listens endlessly, even when exhausted, because they are afraid that setting a boundary would end the friendship. On the surface, it looks like care, but underneath, it is fear dressed as affection. This is where the hunger for approval seeps into the very soil of love. We begin giving not from fullness, but from emptiness. We start doing things not because they feel true, but because we are hoping to secure our place in someone's life. Jung warned that when we abandon our authentic self to maintain a connection, the soul contracts. Love becomes a strategy, kindness becomes currency, presence becomes performance. We lose ourselves not because they asked us to, but because we never believed we were worthy without earning our place. And the tragedy is, this pattern often begins with good intentions. You give more because you love. You sacrifice because you care. But without noticing, that giving turns into a silent plea. Please don't leave me. Please see me. Please tell me I matter. When the response doesn't match the hidden expectation, disappointment brews. And from that disappointment, resentment quietly grows. You start noticing the imbalances. You begin to feel invisible, used, or taken for granted. You may not say it aloud, but a storm builds within. This is the invisible chain where love is no longer free, but tied to a secret contract. I did this for you, so now you must do this for me. And yet the other person never agreed to this deal, so they pull away, and you feel betrayed. You accuse them of being cold, selfish, and distant. But deep inside, you also feel the ache of self-abandonment. You know on some level that you gave what you didn't really want to give, just to be chosen. Carl Jung taught that love cannot survive when built on unconscious projection. We don't just fall in love with the person in front of us, we fall in love with the role we hope they will play, and when they fail to deliver the safety we are seeking, we collapse. We think the relationship is broken, but often it's our own disowned self that is crying out. You didn't speak about your needs. You didn't say no when you wanted to. You didn't show them who you really were. You showed them who you thought they wanted. So now comes the painful, necessary question. Do you love them? Or are you addicted to being loved by them? Are you giving from truth or giving to avoid abandonment? Is your presence a gift or a performance? Healing begins when you stop expecting love to rescue you from yourself, when you stop giving as a way to earn belonging, when you start choosing yourself, even when it feels risky. It may mean fewer grand gestures. It may mean more honest conversations. It may mean you are no longer the one who always says yes. But it also means your love will be clean. It will be real. It will be offered, not traded. To truly love someone is to risk being fully seen, to hold space for your needs without guilt, to let go of the idea that you must constantly perform to be kept. As Jung said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And this includes inside your relationships. So what happens when you stop bending? When you stop bribing others with kindness and instead show up rooted in truth? Some people will leave, some will be confused, but the ones who remain will meet the real you. Not the mask, not the role, but the soul. And that is where love finally begins. What if your healing begins the moment you stop apologizing for who you truly are? There comes a quiet yet radical moment in every life when pretending becomes more painful than rejection, when your body tightens every time you say yes but mean no, when you realize you are exhausted not from doing too much, but from being too much for everyone else and nothing for yourself. You wake up and feel the weight of every unsaid word, every suppressed desire, every time you smiled when your heart was breaking. And then comes the question that rearranges your soul. What if I stop trying to be liked? We are taught early that likability is survival. As children, we shape ourselves according to what gets approval: quietness, helpfulness, obedience. We trade authenticity for affection. Then we grow up and carry this survival instinct into adulthood, mistaking people-pleasing for love and self-erasure for harmony. But the cost is immense. You begin to notice how much of your life is designed not around what you want, but around what you fear others might judge. You post what's safe. You agree when you're tired. You hold back your opinion in rooms that reward silence. And slowly, your soul becomes a stranger to your own voice. Carl Jung called this process the inflation of the persona, the over-identification with the social mask. He warned that the more you depend on others' approval to feel safe, the more you become enslaved by it. It's not just about being nice. It's about losing access to your inner compass. You no longer ask, "Is this right for me?" Instead, you ask, "Will they still like me if I say this?" But here lies the sacred rebellion, the courage to be disliked, to say no without guilt, to stop over-explaining your boundaries, to let someone misunderstand you without rushing to fix it. These are not acts of cruelty. They are acts of sacred protection, because if love costs you your truth, it is not love, it is performance. If peace costs you your authenticity, it is not peace, it is submission. Jung reminds us that individuation, the process of becoming your whole self, requires that you reclaim not just the light parts others approve of, but also the shadows that they may not. So what does this look like in real life? It looks like a woman who finally tells her family she will not be attending every holiday gathering this year, not out of spite, but because she's exhausted and needs rest. It looks like a man who tells his friend that he can no longer be the emotional dumping ground and needs a more reciprocal friendship. It looks like a quiet artist who stops mimicking trends and creates work that finally speaks her own language, even if no one claps at first. These people may be judged. They may be called selfish, cold, or difficult, but beneath the surface, something powerful is happening. They are reclaiming their soul. They are stepping out of the prison of performance and into the unpredictable, liberating space of truth. And here's the paradox. When you stop trying to be liked, you begin to be loved for who you truly are. Not everyone will stay. Not everyone will understand. But those who resonate with your real essence will find you. Your connections may become fewer, but they will be deeper. Your days may become quieter, but they will be more peaceful. The anxiety that once came from performing will be replaced by a calm that comes from being. Of course, this isn't easy. The first few steps often feel like grief. You may grieve the loss of a role you once played. You may miss the praise, the comfort of belonging to the crowd. But Jung teaches that freedom lies not in being accepted by the many, but in being united with the self. And once you taste the peace of being inwardly whole, you will never trade it again for superficial harmony. So ask yourself, what would change if you dared to be misunderstood today? Who would you stop performing for? What part of yourself would rise if you stopped apologizing for it? This is not about becoming rude or unkind. It is about finally becoming real. And that kind of realness has a quiet power. It walks into a room without needing to dominate it. It speaks without needing to convince. It chooses silence when words are wasted. And it knows this truth. Being disliked by some is a small price to pay for being deeply known by yourself. Healing, then, is not about fixing your image. It is about letting it fall. It is about choosing your soul's alignment over society's applause. And when you do, the world doesn't end. In fact, it begins again, this time with you fully in it. What if the very thing making you feel behind in life is not your reality, but your habit of comparing timelines that were never meant to match? There is a subtle form of suffering that many carry in silence. It doesn't scream. It whispers when you scroll through photos of someone else's wedding, promotion, or vacation. It tightens in your chest when a friend announces their next big thing and you're still wrestling with unfinished chapters. It isn't envy, exactly. It's the quiet ache that asks, am I falling behind? The pressure doesn't always come from others. It often lives inside you, shaped by invisible comparisons you didn't choose, but inherited from the world. In a culture obsessed with milestones, it's easy to believe that life is a race and success is a scoreboard. By 30, you should have this. By 40, you must achieve that. We begin to measure our worth not by our inner peace, but by the external markers society glorifies: income, relationship status, beauty, productivity. And in this game, there are always winners and losers. If someone blooms faster, earns more, shines brighter, we unconsciously feel dimmed, as if someone else's sunlight proves we live in shade. Carl Jung saw this as the antithesis of individuation. To compare yourself to others is to forget your unique blueprint, to abandon the sacred path carved by your own soul. Jung taught that individuation is not about becoming better than anyone else. It is about becoming fully yourself. It is the process of unfolding like a flower in your own time, with your own rhythm. And in this unfolding, there is no need for comparison, because no one else can bloom your way. But let's be honest, breaking free from comparison isn't easy when algorithms feed you highlight reels, when every platform tempts you to measure your behind-the-scenes pain against someone else's polished performance. Healing begins when you ask, what am I really comparing? Their curated image, or my lived truth? Why do I feel the need to race? Who told me that I'm behind? Real transformation happens when you start seeing life not as a competition, but as a garden. In a garden, no flower feels shame for blooming later than another. The sunflower doesn't shrink when the rose opens first. The cherry tree blossoms in spring, but the olive tree takes years to bear fruit, and neither apologizes for its pace. Each follows its own biological wisdom, its own timing. And so do you. Your soul is not late. It is preparing something that takes the time it takes. This shift in perspective is more than poetic. It is liberating. Imagine a woman in her late 40s who spent decades putting others first. One day, she walks into an art class not because it will become a career, but because it sparks joy. She paints not for applause, but for the feeling of color on canvas. And for the first time in years, she doesn't feel behind. She feels alive. Her life begins not with a promotion or a perfect photo, but with one bold stroke of authenticity. Or think of a man who was once a high achiever, always chasing the next win. Burned out, he retreats into silence and begins journaling. What he finds isn't a new strategy, but an old self he forgot. He stops comparing his success to others and starts asking deeper questions. What truly nourishes me? What matters when no one is watching? The competition fades. A deeper purpose begins. When you break free from comparison, something sacred happens. You start rooting in your own soil. You start blooming not on schedule, but on soul time. You begin to notice your own quiet progress, the way you speak up for yourself without trembling, the way you rest without guilt, the way you can celebrate another's joy without questioning your worth. These are signs of inner maturity, and they're not always visible to the world, but they're real, and they matter. Jung believed that wholeness is the goal, not perfection. And wholeness cannot be measured on a scale or a calendar. It cannot be filtered through applause or validated by others' timelines. It must be lived day by day through presence, alignment, and trust in the unfolding. So pause and ask yourself, what am I rushing toward? Whose timeline am I chasing? What if I'm exactly where I'm meant to be, not because I've arrived, but because I've finally stopped running? Letting go of comparison is not giving up. It is waking up from the illusion that you are less just because someone else is more. And once you do, life softens. You begin to witness your own path not as a series of delays, but as a sacred design. You realize you were never late. You were always becoming. And in that moment, you stop shrinking. You start blooming. What is the cost of being loved for someone you are not? It begins subtly. A small silence here, a smile that hides the truth there. You say yes when your soul says no. You agree when your instincts tighten. Over time, the pattern becomes a prison. You begin living not as a self, but as a reflection, a mirror shaped by what others want to see. Carl Jung warned us that to live only through the lens of the external is to abandon the sacred essence within. You may gain acceptance, but you will lose something far more precious, your own aliveness. The truth is, many people carry this silent grief. They appear successful, admired, even adored, but deep inside, they feel ghost-like, disconnected from their real desires, numb to their own voice, afraid that if they removed the mask, even for a moment, the world would turn away. But the more you perform, the more your soul retreats, until one day you wake up and wonder, who am I when no one is watching? That moment, painful as it is, marks the beginning of your liberation. Jung believed that the journey of individuation, the journey back to your true self, is not about becoming special, but about becoming whole. It is not about pleasing the world, but about aligning with your inner compass. And often, that means making courageous choices, saying no when it would be easier to comply, speaking truth when silence feels safer, letting go of approval in order to reclaim your integrity. When you stop living for applause, something profound happens. You start hearing the soft voice within. You begin to trust your rhythms. You start walking, not faster, not slower, but in step with your soul. You may lose people, but you will never again lose yourself. The world does not need another perfect image. It needs your presence, your honesty, your messy, glorious, evolving truth. That is where connection is born, not in performance, but in presence, not in impressing, but in being real. So here is the choice. Continue living a lie and slowly disappear from your own life, or choose the raw freedom of being who you really are. The path of authenticity may be lonelier at first, but it is sacred, because the moment you return to yourself, you return to life, and nothing is more radiant than a soul no longer pretending. That is where true joy lives. That is where real freedom begins. If this touched something sacred inside you, don't let it fade into silence. Like this video, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Your presence here is not just support, it's resonance. And if you feel moved to give back, your donation becomes a quiet but powerful gesture that helps keep this light alive for others still walking in the dark.